On March 8, 1944, a critical juncture unfolded on Hill 700 in Bougainville. The American defensive line was experiencing severe pressure, with the relentless night assaults of the Japanese 23rd Infantry causing significant cracks. Major General John Hester observed his 37th Infantry Division losing ground, bunker by bunker, position by position. Conventional military wisdom, ingrained in every War College curriculum, would have dictated a retreat, a strategic withdrawal to more secure territory, to consolidate forces and preserve manpower. Yet, as the sun ascended over the Solomon Islands that fateful morning, Hester made an unconventional decision, one that would typically lead to a court-martial. Instead of pulling back his weary troops, he commanded them to hold their positions, to entrench themselves more deeply, and to allow the Japanese forces to draw even closer. His subordinate officers were visibly stunned as enemy units began to complete their encirclement of the American positions. The Japanese commanders, in turn, were incredulous at their perceived stroke of fortune. They believed the Americans were ensnared, completely surrounded, with no viable escape route. General Harukichi Hyakutake's contingent of 1,700 men eagerly advanced into what appeared to be an ideal killing zone. What the Japanese failed to comprehend, however, was that they had just unwittingly stumbled into one of the most meticulously orchestrated traps in the entire Pacific theater of operations. The initial Japanese artillery shells commenced their descent upon Hill 700 at 2300 hours on March 9th. Major General John Hester, ensconced within his command bunker, intently scrutinized the fluctuating radio reports as they crackled amidst the static. The enemy's bombardment was executed with methodical precision, systematically traversing the American positions with the unwavering regularity of a metronome. Each successive explosion sent palpable tremors through the composite of coral and mud that constituted the foundational strength of the 37th Infantry Division's defensive fortifications. We encourage you to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please also consider leaving a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Colonel George Reed pressed his field telephone firmly against his ear. His voice strained as he shouted over the pervasive din, endeavoring to coordinate the response of his 2nd Battalion. The Japanese 23rd Infantry had chosen their moment with exceptional timing. A moonless night, ensuring that American air support would be grounded and visibility would be severely limited to mere yards. Reed's men, ensconced within their foxholes and makeshift bunkers, could distinctly hear the enemy's movements through the dense jungle below. The sounds were unmistakable. The faint metallic clink of equipment, the hushed commands whispered in Japanese, and the subtle rustle of vegetation as hundreds of enemy soldiers stealthily advanced toward the American positions. Captain Edward Johnson, demonstrating remarkable courage and dedication, moved from bunker to bunker along the forward line. He meticulously checked ammunition inventories, ensuring his men were adequately supplied, and offered words of reassurance to bolster their morale amidst the escalating tension. The mathematical reality of their predicament was stark and unforgiving. The Japanese had committed a formidable force of 1,700 troops to this assault. While Johnson's company was responsible for defending a sector initially designed for twice that number of personnel, his men were critically spread thin, manning positions that, ideally, should have received significant reinforcements weeks prior. The coral ridge forming Hill 700 undeniably offered inherent defensive advantages, yet these natural benefits were rendered largely inconsequential if there were an insufficient number of rifles available to effectively hold the line against such a concentrated enemy thrust. At precisely 0200 hours, the enemy artillery barrage abruptly ceased. The ensuing silence was, paradoxically, far more unsettling than the preceding bombardment had been. Sergeant William Harris, a veteran of countless engagements, peered intently through the oppressive darkness, his Thompson submachine gun steadily aimed at the tree line below. Years of arduous combat experience in the Pacific theater had honed his ability to discern the characteristic rhythm of Japanese attacks. The sudden cessation of fire unequivocally signaled their imminent advance. The initial wave of assault troops struck at Aero 215. Japanese soldiers materialized from the dense jungle like specters, their uniforms stained dark with mud and their faces deliberately blackened with charcoal for camouflage. They moved in small, highly coordinated groups, expertly utilizing the rugged terrain to conceal their approach until they were within effective grenade range of the American positions. The distinctive, sharp crack of Arisaka rifles reverberated across the hillside as sporadic muzzle flashes momentarily illuminated the darkness, appearing like deadly, fleeting fireflies. From his command post, Reed meticulously coordinated the defensive fire, relaying precise coordinates for the 75mm guns strategically positioned behind the ridge. The American artillery responded with remarkable swiftness, within minutes, sending high-explosive shells screaming ominously over the heads of the defending infantry. Each concussive round momentarily illuminated the battlefield in stark, dramatic relief, starkly revealing the true, overwhelming scale of the Japanese assault. They were attacking in relentless waves, with fresh troops consistently moving forward as soon as the preceding group was either pinned down or effectively neutralized. Johnson found himself embroiled in a desperate close-quarters struggle for Bunker 17, a heavily reinforced position that critically controlled the eastern approach to the hilltop. Japanese soldiers had managed to infiltrate within 50 yards of his position, an alarming proximity that allowed him to distinctly hear their shouted commands and the metallic snap of their rifle bolts. His men responded with controlled, disciplined bursts from their Garand rifles, the distinctive ping of empty clips ejecting marking the relentless rhythm of the firefight. During the brief lulls for reloading, they could hear the piteous cries of the wounded emanating in both English and Japanese. As the night wore on, the enemy's tactical doctrine became increasingly evident. They were systematically probing for inherent weak points in the American defenses, simultaneously testing American resolve at multiple locations. Upon identifying a breach or a perceived vulnerability in the defensive line, they would swiftly concentrate their forces, pushing aggressively to achieve a decisive breakthrough. This was a proven and often successful strategy that had served them well throughout their various campaigns in the Pacific. However, it necessitated constant, sustained pressure and a continuous supply of fresh troops to maintain its momentum and effectiveness. Harris, demonstrating exceptional leadership and tactical acumen, spearheaded a small, daring counterattack against a Japanese squad that had managed to penetrate the perimeter near Bunker 12. Moving through the dense darkness with practiced stealth and efficiency, his team employed a combination of grenades and automatic weapons to swiftly clear the enemy from positions they had occupied only minutes prior. The fighting was intensely intimate and brutally vicious, conducted at ranges so close that soldiers could discern each other's faces in the fleeting illumination of muzzle flashes. Harris grimly witnessed 2 of his men fall to Japanese bayonets before his Thompson submachine gun decisively cut down the remaining attackers. By 400 hours, a discernible pattern of the battle had firmly established itself. The Japanese would consistently mass their forces for an assault, charging American positions with remarkable courage and unwavering determination. The American defenders would meet these charges with concentrated rifle fire and robust artillery support, inflicting heavy casualties upon the attackers, but inevitably they were gradually compelled to yield ground. American wounded personnel were systematically evacuated to aid stations situated behind the ridge, while the grim accumulation of Japanese bodies became an increasingly stark feature in the coral and mud of no man's land. Reed, with a keen understanding of the broader strategic implications, recognized that his battalion was fighting not merely for terrain, but critically for time. Every hour they managed to hold their positions effectively delayed the enemy's advance toward the vital airfields, thereby purchasing invaluable time for the arrival of reinforcements and crucial supply drops. The Japanese 23rd Infantry was undoubtedly an elite and formidable unit, but they were operating at the extreme end of a long and increasingly tenuous supply line. Consequently, every round they expended, every grenade they threw, inexorably brought them closer to the point of complete exhaustion. The relentless pressure of the ongoing engagement pushed the American forces towards the brink of complete exhaustion. As the clock approached 0500 hours, the operational circumstances devolved into an extremely precarious state. Stealthy Japanese infiltrators had cunningly maneuvered past the forward defenses, penetrating deep into the American rear. This audacious infiltration posed a grave menace to the vital command posts, which served as the nerve centers of the defense and imperiled the critical supply routes, the very lifelines sustaining the entire defensive effort. Captain Johnson, a steadfast commander, found his unit embroiled in a desperate, multi-directional struggle as enemy combatants materialized from unforeseen vantage points, launching assaults that fragmented his company's focus. At the commencement of the night's brutal fighting, his company boasted a strength of 137 seasoned soldiers. However, with the first light of dawn piercing the tropical canopy, Johnson's grim tally revealed a stark reduction. Fewer than 90 individuals remained physically able and mentally prepared to continue the fierce combat. With the advent of sunrise on March 10th, casting its golden rays across the rugged terrain of Bougainville, a momentary, uneasy lull descended upon the battlefield, allowing both the American and Japanese forces a grim opportunity to appraise the devastating toll of the preceding night's ferocious clashes. The Imperial Japanese Army had indeed managed to seize territory, successfully dislodging American defenders from their previously established forward outposts, demonstrating a fierce determination. Yet, this tactical advantage came at an exceedingly steep and dreadful cost. Prudent and conservative assessments of the casualties inflicted upon the enemy indicated a staggering figure. More than 300 Japanese soldiers had been either killed in action or severely wounded throughout the nocturnal engagement, a testament to the ferocity of the American resistance. While American losses were comparatively lighter, they were nonetheless substantial and deeply felt. 18 brave men had perished, and 43 others had sustained injuries, collectively accounting for nearly 15% of the valiant defending contingent. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Major General Hester meticulously reviewed the morning intelligence reports, his brow furrowed with escalating apprehension. His division, though battered and weary, had managed to retain its defensive posture, but only by the narrowest of margins, teetering precariously on the edge of collapse. The Japanese forces had unequivocally showcased both their formidable tactical acumen and an unyielding resolve to reclaim Hill 700, irrespective of the sacrifices required. Even more disquieting was the crucial intelligence data suggesting that the enemy's 23rd Infantry, which had spearheaded the recent assaults, constituted merely the vanguard, the initial surge of a far more extensive and formidable offensive. General Hyakutake, the audacious Japanese commander, was reportedly committing the entirety of his 17th Army to this pivotal confrontation, effectively wagering his entire campaign on a single, conclusive thrust designed to shatter American opposition and re-establish control over the vital strategic airfields. Installations that had unequivocally become the linchpin for asserting dominance across the entire Solomon Islands archipelago. The dawn of March 11th offered no cessation from the relentless hostilities. General Hyakutake, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to his strategic objective, had deployed his reserve forces under the cover of darkness, systematically channeling fresh battalions into the ongoing offensive against Hill 700. This action reflected the methodical tenacity of a commander who profoundly grasped that the outcome of this particular engagement would irrevocably seal the destiny of Japanese resistance throughout the Solomon Islands. His intelligence staff had relayed reports indicating a perceived erosion of American morale, confidently asserting that just one additional, synchronized offensive would utterly disintegrate their defensive fortifications. However, what these officers crucially failed to comprehend was that Major General Hester, with a calculated and strategic brilliance, had been intentionally permitting his defensive lines to gradually recede and contract, thereby luring the Japanese deeper into a meticulously prepared killing zone of his own devising, a deadly trap set with precision. Colonel Reed, peering intently through the powerful lenses of his field glasses, observed with a growing sense of urgency as enemy troops began to coalesce en masse within the dense jungle foliage below. Their movements, though still partially obscured, were now discernibly visible in the harsh daylight, despite their meticulous, yet ultimately insufficient efforts at camouflage. It was evident that the Japanese command had assimilated critical lessons from their preceding night's assault, opting for a more focused approach by concentrating their formidable forces at specific, identified points of vulnerability, rather than dissipating their strength by launching scattered attacks across the entirety of the expansive American perimeter. Reed's quick mental tally revealed at least 400 enemy combatants meticulously preparing for the impending next wave of assault, a numerical superiority far exceeding what his already depleted battalion could realistically hope to withstand or repel. With a decisive motion, he reached for his radio handset, his voice cutting through the ambient sounds of the battlefield as he commenced relaying precise coordinates to the formidable artillery batteries strategically positioned behind the protective elevation of the ridge. Precisely at 1100 hours, the formidable American 105mm howitzers unleashed their devastating fury, their high explosive shells gracefully arcing through the tropical sky above Hill 700 before descending with crushing force into the designated Japanese staging areas. Each dedicated gun crew had been provisioned with a substantial allocation of 200 rounds for the day's expected intense fighting, a remarkably generous supply that unequivocally underscored the dire and critical nature of their tactical predicament. The ensuing artillery barrage proved to be utterly devastating in its pinpoint accuracy, its destructive precision meticulously guided by the vigilant forward observers who had diligently spent the entire morning identifying and pinpointing significant enemy concentrations. Great, ominous plumes of dense black smoke billowed skyward from the verdant jungle canopy as the high, explosive projectiles found their intended marks with terrifying efficacy. However, Colonel Reed, a seasoned veteran, harbored no illusions, understanding intrinsically that even such a powerful and precise artillery bombardment, while inflicting heavy damage, would prove insufficient in halting a truly resolute and determined enemy assault. During the fleeting interval of calm, Captain Johnson had shrewdly redeployed his depleted but resilient contingent, withdrawing them from the exposed forward slope of the hill to more advantageous defensive emplacements that afforded superior fields of fire. His company now strategically occupied a meticulously engineered network of interconnected bunkers and robust fighting holes, positioned along the military crest of the hill. These formidable positions had been painstakingly constructed weeks prior by adept combat engineers, individuals who possessed a profound understanding of the critical tactical advantages inherent in a reverse slope defense. Johnson's men were thus perfectly situated to remain expertly concealed, patiently awaiting the moment the enemy fully committed to their frontal assault, before emerging suddenly to unleash a torrent of devastating enfilade fire against the exposed and vulnerable Japanese formations, catching them in a deadly crossfire. Sergeant Harris had been entrusted with a particularly pivotal assignment within Captain Johnson's elaborate defensive blueprint. His dedicated squad was strategically positioned within Bunker 19, a heavily reinforced and formidable strongpoint that exercised dominant command over the most probable route of advance for the impending Japanese attackers. Harris had diligently utilized the early morning hours, meticulously scrutinizing ammunition stockpiles and ensuring, through clear and concise instruction, that each of his men possessed a thorough comprehension of their designated fire lanes and arcs of responsibility. Every soldier was equipped with 8 clips for his reliable Garand rifle, complemented by a substantial reserve of additional ammunition specifically designated for the squad's potent Browning automatic rifle and their 2 rapid-firing Thompson submachine guns. Harris, with a veteran's precision, estimated that his 9-man squad could sustain approximately 20 minutes of intense, unremitting combat before necessitating a crucial resupply of their expended munitions. The anticipated enemy assault commenced with brutal suddenness at 1330 hours, initiated by a highly concentrated mortar barrage that methodically walked its destructive path across the American defensive positions with terrifying and deadly accuracy. Japanese forward observers having meticulously identified crucial defensive strongpoints during the fierce engagements of the preceding night, now directed their 81mm mortars to target these specific locations with relentless and methodical precision. The intense bombardment endured for a grueling 15 minutes, transforming the air into a chaotic maelstrom of flying coral fragments and powerful concussive blasts that reverberated through the terrain, leaving many American soldiers temporarily deafened and profoundly disoriented by the sheer force of the explosions. Directly on the heels of their pulverizing supporting fires, the Japanese infantry launched their frontal attack, surging forth from the dense jungle in company strength, while their mortar teams expertly shifted their destructive attention to targets situated deeper within the American perimeter. This particular assault exhibited a far superior level of coordination and tactical sophistication compared to anything Colonel Reed's embattled battalion had encountered during the chaotic fighting of the previous night. It was characterized by adept covering fire and precise tactical movements that unequivocally showcased the enemy's heightened professional competence and discipline training. Reed observed with a keen, analytical eye as enemy soldiers advanced relentlessly by bounds, skillfully exploiting available natural cover and deploying smoke grenades to effectively mask their approach, thereby concealing their movements until they were well within optimal assault range of the American defensive positions. Captain Johnson's company, strategically positioned, absorbed the full, devastating impact of the assault, as Japanese soldiers, driven by an unwavering resolve, stormed ferociously up the steep eastern slope of Hill 700. The enemy command had deliberately concentrated a formidable force of nearly 300 men against his specific sector, a numerical superiority representing overwhelming odds that would undoubtedly have shattered and demoralized a less seasoned or less resilient unit. Johnson, exhibiting remarkable composure and tactical acumen, patiently withheld his order to engage until the attacking formation was fully and irrevocably committed to their advance. The ensuing outcome was nothing short of devastating. A deluge of concentrated rifle fire, unleashed with precision from the Americans' expertly concealed positions, scythed down the leading Japanese squads with brutal efficiency, creating gaping voids and disarray within their formations. Chasms that subsequent waves of attackers desperately struggled and largely failed to adequately fill, thereby disrupting the momentum of their offensive. The previous efforts to establish a secure foothold had proven arduous, but the moment arrived when the enemy's presence became acutely personal. Harris found himself locked in combat at extremely close quarters as hostile soldiers managed to reach his fortified bunker. The overall tactical situation had precipitously worsened, with Japanese troops breaching the protective cordon at numerous points across the perimeter. Utilizing his trusty Thompson submachine gun, Harris efficiently dislodged hostile combatants from the fighting positions immediately adjacent to his own, navigating through the intricate network of communication trenches that linked the various defensive emplacements. His profound familiarity with the intricate layout of the defensive works enabled him to effectively coordinate with neighboring squads, focusing their volleys against the most perilous incursions. The engagement reached its pivotal juncture around 1500 hours, when Imperial Japanese forces succeeded in overrunning and securing Bunker 17, the very strong point Johnson had steadfastly defended just 2 nights prior. Enemy soldiers defiantly raised their battle flag over the newly captured position, a potent emblem of triumph that seemed to portend the disintegration of American resistance. Yet Johnson, with remarkable foresight, had anticipated this critical moment. Strategically deploying his contingent of fresh troops to deliver converging volleys from the sides against any enemy troops who dared to occupy the bunker. The ensuing counterattack was both rapid and merciless, with American soldiers employing a combination of grenades and automatic weapons to expel the Imperial forces from positions they had maintained for a fleeting period of less than 10 minutes. Reed, with practiced expertise, orchestrated the vital barrages from his heavy ordnance in support of the counterattack, unleashing a deluge of focused projectiles from his 75mm guns upon Japanese troops who were endeavoring to bolster their newly acquired strongholds. The artillery was firing at the closest possible proximity, with shells passing a mere 50 yards over the heads of the American infantrymen. The unparalleled accuracy required for such an operation was extraordinary, demanding fraction of a second synchronization and an unwavering confidence between the forward observers and the dedicated gun crews. Reed observed as detonations cascaded across the hillside, each burst perfectly placed to shatter the cohesion of the adversary's ranks without endangering his own men. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. By 1600 hours, the Japanese assault had reached the apex of its intensity. Enemy casualties were accruing at a rate that outpaced the command's ability to reinforce, and the surviving combatants were exhibiting clear indicators of profound fatigue and plummeting morale. Harris, from his vantage point, tallied over 60 Japanese bodies within 100 yards of his position, a stark demonstration of the efficacy of the defensive fire plan. American casualties, while less severe, were nonetheless substantial. Johnson's company was reduced to a mere complement of under 70 operational personnel, while Reed's entire battalion had suffered over 40% losses since the initiation of the fighting. The overarching tactical situation was crystallizing for both belligerents. The Japanese command had deployed their elite combat units to capture Hill 700, but they were being methodically annihilated by the superior American firepower and astute defensive tactics. General Hyakutake's desperate maneuver was proving unsuccessful, not due to any deficiency in valor or proficiency on the part of his soldiers, but rather as a direct consequence of his misjudgment of both the formidable nature of the American fortifications and the unwavering determination of their garrisons. Every repelled offensive diminished his combat power, while bolstering the American belief in their capacity to hold their ground. Hester perused the dispatches from the late hours of the day with increasing contentment. His tactical approach of conceding ground to gain precious hours was unfolding precisely according to its design. The Japanese were systematically depleting their strength against meticulously prepared positions, incurring irrecoverable losses while acquiring no discernible strategic advantage. The enemy 17th Army was being methodically dismantled, one assault at a time, by an American force that had seemed poised on the precipice of capitulation just days earlier. The break of day, on March 13th, heralded the commencement of General Hyakutake's ultimate desperate maneuver. Dispatches arriving at his command post conveyed information that American reinforcements were being prepared for deployment to Bougainville. which signified that his moment of advantageous action was swiftly diminishing. Hyakutake had deployed virtually the entirety of his 17th Army to this offensive, retaining merely a paltry contingent of backup forces for a concluding definitive assault. His staff officers had calculated that one more coordinated attack would completely shatter American resistance, but their computations neglected to factor in the elaborate snare that Major General Hester had been assiduously fabricating over the preceding 4 days. Hester remained within the confines of his fortified command post, scrutinizing the tallies of fallen personnel and the consumption rates of ordnance, with the composed bearing which had garnered him the esteem of his subordinates. The 37th Infantry Division had endured 263 fatalities and injuries during the fierce combat, a decrement amounting to almost 1/5 of his fighting capability. However, Japanese casualties narrated a starkly contrasting account. Prudent appraisals estimated the adversary's fatalities to exceed 800, with a comparable number of injured personnel. This disparity was indefensible for any attacking force, irrespective of their tactical proficiency or individual valor. Colonel Reed had dedicated the nocturnal hours to redeploying his residual troops, amassing his diminished companies in interdependent strongpoints that optimized their capacity for protective barrages. His 2nd Battalion now occupied a defensive arc, resembling a horseshoe, a configuration expertly designed to lure assailing units into overlapping zones of concentrated gunfire. Reed thoroughly understood that this would be the pivotal confrontation, the moment when the fervent resolve of the Imperial forces would clash head-on with the meticulous readiness of the American defenders. His artillery-forward observers had previously mapped coordinates for artillery strikes across all ingress paths, establishing a grid of lethal sectors that could be triggered in mere moments of an enemy advance. Captain Johnson now presided over a force that fell short of a complete company. His casualties had been exceedingly heavy, so much so that he now led an enlarged platoon supplemented by personnel salvaged from disparate detachments and a small contingent of newly assigned soldiers who had reported in under the cover of darkness. Johnson had stationed his troops within the fortifications known as Bunker Complex Alpha, an array of mutually linked defensive emplacements that commanded the eastern access route to Hill 700. Each position had been provisioned with extra ordnance and essential medical provisions, a deliberate readiness for what all comprehended would be a battle of ultimate attrition. The Japanese attack commenced precisely at 0600 hours with the most formidable artillery bombardment American forces had encountered since the initiation of the campaign. Enemy mortars and field guns focused their destructive volleys upon identified strongpoints, seeking to incapacitate American opposition before their ground troop offensive was launched. The shelling reached such a ferocious pitch that Reed momentarily severed contact with 2 of his companies, compelling him to manage the defensive effort via dispatched messengers and optical cues. Shards of coral and slivers of steel permeated the atmosphere as Japanese shells systematically aimed at every discernible American emplacement. Sergeant Harris, a seasoned veteran, hunched low within the confines of Bunker 19, the relentless concussions of enemy shells echoing ominously around his hardened post. His grip tightened instinctively on his Thompson submachine gun, a weapon he had meticulously inspected countless times, a nervous ritual born of the intense pressure. His beleaguered squad, now diminished to a mere 6 combat-ready individuals, held what was arguably the most pivotal strongpoint along the entire American defensive perimeter. Through the swirling haze of smoke, a byproduct of the incessant artillery bombardment, Harris discerned the unmistakable movements of Japanese infantry congregating in the verdant jungle below. He conservatively estimated their numbers at no fewer than 2 companies, a formidable force that vastly outnumbered his depleted unit, a challenge far too great for defensive small arms fire to repel on its own. At precisely 0630 hours, the enemy's long-anticipated infantry assault erupted, commencing immediately after their preparatory artillery barrage abruptly ceased. Japanese soldiers surged forward in disciplined waves, skillfully exploiting every available natural and man-made cover as they steadily ascended the treacherous slopes of Hill 700. Their tactical coordination and execution displayed an unprecedented level of sophistication, surpassing anything American forces had previously encountered throughout the protracted conflict. They employed a methodical combination of smoke grenades, precise covering fire, and well-drilled bound and overwatch movements, all indicative of a highly trained and professionally competent fighting force. From his vantage point, Reed observed through his field glasses as these enemy formations deployed with almost textbook precision, their officers maintaining an impressive degree of command and control, even amidst the thunderous and devastating American counter-responses. Johnson's position bore the brunt of this concentrated Japanese offensive, with an estimated 200 enemy soldiers converging upon his reinforced platoon. Despite the overwhelming numerical disadvantage, Johnson's resolute position possessed inherent strengths that mere numbers could not easily surmount. His men were entrenched within meticulously prepared defensive positions, fortified and enhanced by the invaluable advantage of pre-registered artillery support. In stark contrast, the advancing Japanese troops were compelled to traverse exposed, open terrain, making them vulnerable to direct and continuous observation. Johnson, demonstrating exceptional tactical acumen and iron discipline, deliberately withheld his men's fire until the enemy formation was deeply committed and fully exposed. A calculated decision designed to maximize the destructive efficiency of their critically limited ammunition supply. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Where are you from and what do you think about the video topic? The subsequent American defensive fire was both devastating in its accuracy and overwhelming in its sheer volume. Each defensive position had been meticulously assigned specific arcs of fire, deliberately engineered to create interlocking fields of fire that ensnared the advancing Japanese soldiers in lethal, inescapable crossfires. Harris, from his bunker, witnessed with grim resolve as enemy soldiers crumpled by the dozen, cut down by the relentless and concentrated rifle fire that swept across their ranks from multiple converging angles. The Browning automatic rifles proved particularly lethal, their formidable sustained fire capability enabling American gunners to engage and neutralize numerous targets in rapid succession. Reed, with practiced efficiency, orchestrated the supporting artillery, bringing down thunderous salvos from his 105mm howitzers with pinpoint accuracy upon Japanese troops attempting to consolidate or reorganize for subsequent assaults. The artillery batteries were operating at their absolute maximum rate, each gun crew expending their allotted ammunition as swiftly as safety protocols would permit. Reed had meticulously calculated that his batteries could sustain this blistering rate of fire for precisely 27 minutes before depleting their basic load. Yet he gambled that this intense 27-minute barrage would be entirely sufficient to utterly shatter the enemy's assault. The critical juncture of the battle arrived at 07:15 hours, when Japanese soldiers achieved a perilous breach of the American perimeter, swiftly seizing bunker complex Beta and thereby posing a grave threat to unravel the entire defensive line. Enemy troops defiantly hoisted their battle flag over the newly captured position, a potent, symbolic victory that seemed to presage the imminent triumph of their offensive. However, this specific penetration had been shrewdly anticipated within American operational planning, with predetermined counterattack routes and precisely coordinated supporting fires already established. Johnson immediately spearheaded the response, skillfully maneuvering his reserve squad through concealed approaches to deliver devastating flanking fire against the enemy-held strongpoints. Harris soon found himself engaged in fierce, close-quarters combat inside the very American perimeter, as Japanese soldiers desperately attempted to exploit their initial breakthrough. The tactical situation rapidly devolved into a fluid, chaotic melee, with small, desperate groups of soldiers from both sides maneuvering through the intricate defensive complex in a deadly, high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. Harris, leveraging his intimate familiarity with the bunker layout, expertly ambushed enemy troops, employing grenades and automatic weapons in brutal, close-range engagements, where victory was often decided in mere seconds, rather than by any overarching tactical advantage. The Japanese offensive reached its inevitable culmination point around 800 hours, when their mounting casualties surpassed their capacity to sustain any further offensive momentum. Harris, surveying the grim aftermath from his position, counted over 120 Japanese bodies within his direct line of sight, a stark and somber testament to the devastating efficacy of the concentrated American defensive fire. American casualties, while comparatively lighter, were nonetheless significant. Johnson's platoon had been severely reduced to fewer than 30 men, while Reed's entire battalion had incurred additional losses, bringing their total casualties to over 400 since the commencement of hostilities. By 0900 hours, Japanese resistance had effectively disintegrated. The surviving enemy soldiers were observed retreating in disarray through the dense jungle, abandoning valuable equipment and even their wounded comrades in their desperate haste to escape the relentless American artillery fire. Reed promptly organized pursuit forces to maintain contact with the withdrawing enemy, signifying that the tactical initiative had now decisively shifted in favor of the American forces. General Hyakutake's audacious gamble had failed utterly, exacting a catastrophic toll of over 2,200 casualties, while yielding absolutely nothing of strategic consequence. Major General Hester methodically surveyed the ravaged battlefield as the morning light fully illuminated the grim extent of Japanese losses. The enemy 17th Army had been systematically decimated, not through an aggressive American offensive, but rather through a meticulously executed defensive strategy that had ingeniously turned Japanese aggression back upon itself. The unwavering patience and exemplary tactical discipline demonstrated by his 37th Infantry Division had achieved what had seemed an insurmountable feat just days earlier: the complete and decisive defeat of a numerically superior enemy force through defensive operations alone. The profound silence that descended upon Hill 700 on the afternoon of March 13th was more resonant and impactful than any cacophony the battle had produced. Major General Hester walked contemplatively among the battered defensive positions, quietly observing the methodical, somber work of his soldiers as they diligently collected discarded equipment and tenderly ministered to their wounded comrades. The formidable coral and mud, which had formed the unyielding backbone of their defensive line, was now deeply scarred with countless shell craters, and littered with the grim detritus of modern warfare. Spent ammunition casings, abandoned weapons, and shattered fragments of equipment that collectively narrated a harrowing tale of desperate combat. Yet, most tellingly, were the numerous bodies scattered across the approaches to the American positions. Stark, tangible evidence of the exorbitant price General Hyakutake had paid for his profound strategic miscalculation. Miscalculation. Colonel Reed oversaw the solemn task of casualty collection, a grim accounting that would ultimately underscore the profound tactical triumph achieved. His 2nd Battalion endured a staggering 147 fatalities and injuries over the protracted 4-day engagement, a figure representing close to 40% of their initial combat strength. In stark contrast, Japanese casualties painted a devastatingly different picture. Cautious appraisals indicated enemy losses at more than 2,200 combatants confirmed dead, alongside at least 800 additional wounded personnel who had been successfully removed from the battlefield during the intense hostilities. The shocking imbalance was so extreme that Reed initially doubted the veracity of his intelligence reports, but the undeniable proof was manifest. Japanese corpses lay strewn in orderly rows across every single access path leading up to the strategically vital Hill 700. Captain Johnson conducted a diligent patrol through the formidable bunker complex Alpha, ascertaining the well-being of his remaining troops and verifying the continuous manning of crucial defensive fortifications, notwithstanding their significantly diminished numbers. His reinforced platoon had been reduced to a mere 18 active personnel, comprising youthful combatants, whose countenances bore the indelible marks of the intense and extended psychological strain of relentless warfare. Johnson possessed a deep comprehension that their hard-won tactical achievement carried a profound cost, one that far transcended mere numerical casualty reports. These individuals had been direct witnesses to the methodical annihilation of a highly trained adversary, an ordeal poised to fundamentally alter their perceptions and comprehension of armed conflict for the entirety of their future military careers. Sergeant Harris meticulously orchestrated the retrieval of discarded Japanese armaments and materiel. This collection was not merely salvage. It represented a treasure trove of invaluable intelligence regarding the enemy's operational capacities and established tactical methodologies. The vast array of weaponry and gear strewn across the blood-soaked battlefield eloquently narrated a tale of impressive professional proficiency, ultimately undone by a critical strategic error. Harris's detailed inspection included abandoned Arisaka rifles, Type 96 light machine guns, and various mortars, all serving as tangible proof of the superior technical craftsmanship inherent in Japanese military hardware. However, the sheer volume of this forsaken equipment starkly underscored the colossal magnitude of their defeat. Complete squads and entire platoons had been annihilated with such swiftness that the few surviving members had no recourse but to jettison their essential gear during their desperate withdrawal. Please stay with us and watch the end of this video for a comprehensive understanding of these pivotal events. We would be immensely grateful for your like and subscription to our channel. Also, we invite you to share in the comments section where you are watching from and your thoughts on the critical topic discussed in this video. The comprehensive intelligence mosaic, meticulously pieced together from exhaustive prisoner interrogations and a trove of seized documents, unveiled the audacious scope of General Hyakutake's strategic wager. The Japanese 17th Army had deployed virtually its entire fighting capacity into this aggressive offensive, retaining only a bare minimum of reserves for the critical task of rear area protection. Enemy high command had erroneously presumed American fighting spirit to be brittle, anticipating that a single, synchronized assault would precipitate a widespread withdrawal, thereby exposing the vital Piva airfields for swift reoccupation. However, their fatal miscalculation led them to encounter a resilient American contingent that had, with deliberate intent, been progressively shrinking its defensive perimeter, a tactical maneuver that effectively lured Japanese forces into pre-established killing zones where overwhelming superior firepower could be devastatingly focused upon their exposed formations. Hester meticulously reviewed the incoming tactical reports, his understanding deepening into a profound appreciation for the far-reaching strategic consequences of their hard-won triumph. The utter annihilation of the Japanese 17th Army transcended the mere confines of a localized tactical achievement. It decisively eradicated any semblance of organized enemy opposition across the entirety of the northern Solomons Archipelago. General Hyakutake's once formidable forces had stood as the final substantial Japanese military formation possessing the capability to jeopardize American dominion over Bougainville, and their decisive elimination thus cleared the path, rendering the entire geographical area accessible for subsequent Allied military endeavors. Furthermore, the strategically vital airfields situated at Piva were now unequivocally secure, establishing an indispensable operational hub for aerial campaigns targeting Japanese strongholds throughout the vast expanse of the Western Pacific. Colonel Reed meticulously orchestrated the systematic expansion of American frontline positions. He actively dispatched reconnaissance patrols further into the contested territory, their mission to sustain continuous engagement with the disengaging Japanese forces. The entire tactical landscape had undergone a profound and complete reversal. American forces now firmly grasped the strategic initiative, while the beleaguered Japanese remnants were compelled to execute a fighting withdrawal across the very terrain they had once harbored ambitions of controlling. Reed's forward patrols transmitted reports detailing numerous abandoned enemy strongpoints scattered throughout the dense jungle, formidable fortifications initially erected to underpin an extended offensive campaign, but which were now being hastily deserted with the utmost speed that the strained Japanese logistical capabilities would allow. The state of medical affairs presented arguably the most unequivocal and somber testament to the decisive conclusion of the battle. American aid stations, throughout the intense four-day conflict, attended to a total of 263 injured personnel. While certainly a notable figure, this number remained comfortably within the operational limits of the division's well-resourced medical infrastructure. In stark contrast, Japanese medical installations had been utterly swamped, completely inundated by the sheer, catastrophic magnitude of their human losses. American reconnaissance teams subsequently uncovered abandoned enemy field hospitals, grim sites where grievously wounded soldiers had been forsaken during the precipitous withdrawal. This served as a poignant and tragic indictment of the complete disintegration of Japanese military cohesion and logistical capability when confronted with an onslaught of utterly unsustainable casualties. Captain Johnson played an integral role in the comprehensive tactical assessment, a crucial analysis intended to shape and guide subsequent American military endeavors across the entire Pacific theater. The hard-fought battle for Hill 700 had unequivocally showcased the formidable efficacy of defensive maneuvers, particularly when fortified by an abundance of superior artillery support and executed from meticulously prepared strongpoints. American forces had adeptly absorbed the initial, brutal impact of the enemy's aggressive assault. Following this, they had methodically dismantled the attacking formations through a combination of overwhelmingly concentrated firepower and unwavering tactical patience. The overarching lesson gleaned from this engagement was unmistakably lucid. Japanese tactical doctrine, irrespective of its professional and disciplined execution, proved ultimately incapable of surmounting the inherent and considerable material advantages that American forces possessed when these assets were deployed with astute precision. Sergeant Harris was formally elevated to the rank of Staff Sergeant, a well-deserved commendation, acknowledging his exceptional leadership during those pivotal junctures, when determined Japanese incursions imperiled the integrity of the entire defensive perimeter. His decisive interventions during the climactic assault had proven absolutely instrumental in staunching enemy attempts to breach the lines. This crucial containment afforded American counterattack units the vital window of opportunity needed to coalesce their forces and mount an effective response. Harris received the promotion with the characteristic, understated dignity of a seasoned professional soldier, understanding implicitly that his individual accolade was, in essence, a symbolic representation of the collective sacrifices made by his squad and the overarching tactical triumph achieved by their unit as a whole. The far-reaching strategic repercussions stemming from the battle reverberated well beyond the immediate confines of Bougainville itself. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific theater, Japanese forces now confronted an American military establishment that had unequivocally showcased its formidable capacity to both withstand sustained enemy offensives and retaliate with utterly devastating efficacy. The comprehensive annihilation of the 17th Army conveyed an unmistakable and stark warning to Japanese high command. It underscored that American defensive proficiencies had advanced far beyond their previous estimations, and consequently, any future military endeavors on their part would necessitate fundamentally divergent strategic and tactical methodologies to harbor even the remotest possibility of achieving success. Major General Hester meticulously crafted his after-action assessment, fully cognizant that this particular engagement would serve as a crucial case study for military strategists and scholars for generations. The fierce clash stood as an exemplary illustration of defensive maneuvers executed with precision, adhering strictly to time-honored tactical tenets, the judicious application of forces, mutual support among units, and the formidable concentration of overwhelming firepower at the critical juncture. His esteemed 37th Infantry Division had unequivocally proven that American fighting units possessed not only the capacity to withstand relentless enemy assaults, but also to systematically dismantle and decimate advancing formations through meticulous foresight and unwavering tactical discipline. The conclusive casualty figures unequivocally underscored the profound tactical victory achieved. American forces, while enduring the somber tally of 263 killed and wounded across the intense four-day conflict, accepted these losses as a regrettable but necessary cost in light of the significant strategic objectives secured. In stark contrast, Japanese casualties soared beyond 1-900 killed and wounded, a devastating blow that effectively signified the near-total obliteration of an entire Army-level combat formation. The resulting exchange ratio was so overwhelmingly advantageous that it fundamentally reshaped the strategic landscape throughout the Northern Solomons, firmly establishing American dominion over vital territory destined to become a crucial staging ground for subsequent offensives against the Japanese home islands. Colonel Reed traversed the network of fortified positions one final time, observing the quiet fortitude and professional demeanor of the soldiers who had distinguished themselves in the crucible of modern warfare. These valiant men had confronted seemingly insurmountable odds, yet emerged triumphant, their victory forged through superior tactical acumen, unyielding individual bravery, and resolute collective purpose. Their decisive triumph at Hill 700 had definitively showcased that American forces commanded both the material resources and the professional proficiency indispensable for vanquishing any adversary, irrespective of their formidable reputation or established tactical doctrine. As we delve deeper into the strategic implications of this pivotal engagement, we invite you to stay with us and watch the end of this video for a full appreciation of its historical significance. We would be immensely grateful for your like and subscription, which helps us continue bringing these stories to light. Please also take a moment to share where you are from in the comments below and what your thoughts are on the profound impact of such battles on the course of history. The subsequent weeks, following the complete collapse of Japanese resistance on Hill 700, brought into sharp relief the true strategic magnitude of the achievement by Major General Hester's 37th Infantry Division. American intelligence operatives painstakingly reconstructed the full scope of General Hyakutake's audacious gamble through the analysis of captured documents and extensive prisoner interrogations. They uncovered that the Japanese 17th Army had committed virtually its entire operational reserve to what its commanders had confidently believed would be a decisive breakthrough. Instead of shattering American morale and successfully recapturing the Piva airfields, Hyakutake had, in essence, systematically orchestrated the destruction of the last significant Japanese force capable of mounting offensive operations in the Northern Solomons. Colonel Reed oversaw the methodical expansion of American defensive perimeters across the entirety of the erstwhile Japanese defensive zone. During this process, his units encountered numerous abandoned fortifications that served as a stark narrative of a once professional military force that had, quite simply, ceased to exist as a viable fighting entity. Japanese engineers had meticulously constructed elaborate defensive installations throughout the dense jungle terrain, positions expressly designed to sustain a protracted campaign, but these now lay desolate, save for scattered remnants of equipment and personal effects, hastily discarded during the chaotic and desperate retreat. Reed's far-ranging reconnaissance patrols consistently reported encountering isolated pockets of Japanese soldiers, disoriented stragglers who had become separated from their parent units amidst the withdrawal, and now aimlessly roamed the jungle without any discernible military objective. The tangible logistical evidence of the Japanese defeat was perhaps even more eloquent and revealing than the grim casualty statistics. American supply officers meticulously catalogued vast quantities of abandoned enemy materiel discovered across the sprawling battlefield, heavy artillery pieces that had been deliberately disabled and left behind when their operating crews were annihilated, mortars discarded when ammunition bearers fell victim to the intense barrage, and machine guns jettisoned by soldiers who lacked the physical strength to transport them during the arduous retreat. This accumulation of military hardware represented months of painstaking preparation and arduous transportation across thousands of miles of the vast Pacific Ocean, now rendered utterly useless by the wholesale destruction of the highly trained forces intended to wield it. Captain Johnson personally led patrols into areas that had functioned as formidable Japanese strongholds just a few days prior, observing the undeniable physical proof of how swiftly military fortunes could reverse when a fundamental tactical miscalculation was met with overwhelming superior firepower. Japanese command posts had been evacuated with such precipitancy that documents and detailed maps remained splayed across planning tables, forming frozen tableaux that vividly captured the abrupt transition from an initial state of confident expectation to utter catastrophe. Johnson's men even unearthed personal letters penned by Japanese officers to their families, correspondence that chillingly revealed their absolute certainty that this offensive would achieve decisive results and permit their triumphant return home. The profound human cost of the Japanese strategic blunder became painfully evident as American medical personnel established aid stations within the newly secured former enemy territory. Sergeant Harris participated in the somber and arduous task of interring Japanese soldiers who had perished during the retreat, young men whose bodies bore unmistakable evidence of the devastating efficacy of American defensive fires. Many had succumbed to artillery fragments, becoming victims of the concentrated firepower that Colonel Reed had orchestrated with such lethal precision. Others exhibited wounds inflicted by small arms fire, a testament to the brutal, close-quarters combat that had characterized the final desperate Japanese assault attempts. Major General Hester subsequently received crucial strategic intelligence that situated the battle for Hill 700 within a broader, overarching Pacific context. The wholesale destruction of the Japanese 17th Army had effectively neutralized the last significant threat to American control of the Northern Solomons, thereby decisively securing the Allied flank for future offensive operations against more heavily fortified Japanese positions further afield. Allied strategic planners were already actively integrating the invaluable tactical lessons gleaned from Bougainville into their operational blueprints for impending assaults against the Marshall Islands and other entrenched Japanese strongholds, having fully grasped that superior defensive preparation possessed the inherent capacity to neutralize even the most determined and fanatical enemy attacks. The innovative tactical methodologies developed and perfected during the intense battle rapidly became codified as standard doctrine for American forces deployed throughout the expansive Pacific theater. The defensive techniques masterfully employed by the 37th Infantry Division conclusively demonstrated that meticulously prepared positions robustly supported by concentrated artillery bombardments and resolutely manned by disciplined troops, possessed the ability to absorb and ultimately annihilate attacking formations, irrespective of any numerical superiority the enemy might possess. Consequently, leading military academies and schools commenced studying the engagement as an archetypal example of defensive operations, with particular emphasis placed on the ingenious utilization of reverse slope positions and interlocking fields of fire to maximize defensive effectiveness. Reed collaborated closely with intelligence officers to meticulously record the specific tactical factors that were instrumental in American success, understanding that these invaluable lessons would shape and guide future defensive operations throughout the entire conflict. The formidable concentration of artillery fires, the seamless coordination between infantry units and their various supporting arms, and the profound psychological discipline required for troops to permit enemy forces to advance into meticulously prepared positions, all emerged as pivotal components in their hard-won victory. Reed perceived that they had achieved an extraordinary feat. The utter tactical obliteration of a seasoned professional enemy force through defensive maneuvers alone, a testament to strategic foresight and unwavering resolve. Johnson was officially directed to assume a pivotal staff role where his extensive combat experience would lend invaluable expertise to the instruction of replacement officers destined for operations across the vast Pacific theater. His exemplary performance during the recent engagement had underscored the critical necessity of small unit leadership in the crucible of modern warfare, particularly the ability to make swift and astute operational choices under unrelenting duress. Johnson understood that his promotion represented not merely an individual commendation, but a broader affirmation that the officers who had survived the harrowing ordeal of Hill 700 held vital insights that could profoundly impact and ultimately save American lives in the arduous battles yet to come. The far-reaching strategic repercussions of the Japanese defeat transcended the immediate confines of the tactical situation on Bougainville. Enemy commanders throughout the Pacific now confronted the stark truth that American defensive capabilities had matured to a degree where traditional Japanese offensive doctrines were not only futile, but actively detrimental to their own forces. The methodical annihilation of the 17th Army conclusively demonstrated that American forces possessed not only the resilience to withstand incoming assaults, but also the capacity to exploit those attacks to decimate whole enemy units through superior firepower and meticulous tactical preparation. We ask you to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Harris was instrumental in solidifying an enduring Allied foothold throughout the former Japanese operational area, overseeing the erection and fortification of crucial supply depots and sophisticated communication facilities that would underpin subsequent Allied offensives. The transformation was nothing short of astonishing. Areas that had functioned as formidable Japanese bastions just weeks earlier now served as operational hubs for American forces launching attacks against remaining enemy positions throughout the wider region. Harris perceived acutely that warfare was ultimately predicated on robust logistics and thorough preparation, factors that American forces had excelled in, while their adversaries had emphasized disproportionately individual courage and fleeting tactical innovation. The ultimate strategic appraisal confirmed that the battle for Hill 700 had yielded outcomes far beyond its immediate tactical objectives. The elimination of Japanese offensive potential in the northern Solomons had cemented Allied dominion over territory that would serve as a formidable springboard for operations directly against the Japanese home islands themselves. Hyakutake's grave strategic error had not only fallen short of its intended aims, but it actually hastened the trajectory for Allied victory in the Pacific by neutralizing the final substantial Japanese military presence capable of meaningful resistance in the region. Hester compiled the division's comprehensive concluding report on the engagement, with the profound realization that future military scholars would meticulously analyze this battle for decades to come as a quintessential illustration of the manner in which meticulous readiness and unwavering operational adherence could triumph over numerical inferiority. The 37th Infantry Division had conclusively showcased that American forces wielded not merely a quantitative advantage in resources, but also possessed a caliber of professional expertise that rivaled any adversary they might encounter. The triumph achieved at Hill 700 had unequivocally affirmed that the momentum of the conflict in the Pacific had irrevocably shifted in favor of Allied forces, not primarily via spectacular attacking maneuvers, but through the systematic erosion of enemy capability accomplished through preeminent defensive strategy. The takeaway was unambiguous. Professional military forces, adequately readied and provisioned, could secure conclusive outcomes through endurance, rigorous adherence to doctrine, and the judicious deployment of ordnance at the critical moment.